Hey Ramblers, before we kick off today's episode, I just want you to know that we're finally ready to launch OffSource and it's going to be in October. The team is working tirelessly and endlessly to bring you an amazing product and service. So if you know anyone that needs a virtual assistant or just like to make some extra money for our referral program, tell them to head to offsource.tech or text info to 516-408-2427. Make sure you're following us across all social media at OffSourceHQ. Now let's get ready to ramble. Before we begin, a moment from our sponsor.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Ramblings. As again promised, we have another wonderful guest co-host, Nalini Goolsarran, owner and founder of Edge Space Marketing, digital marketer in the Fairfield County area. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me, Angela.
No problem. It's a wonderful to have you. We've promised a bunch of almost star-studded co-hosts, and so you'd be considered a star-studded co-host today.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to talking to the folks today.
Thank you. So, introduce yourself. I guess, I gave you a small wrestling introduction, but give us some in-depth detail about who you are.
Sure. So I am a digital marketer in Stamford, Connecticut. I'm actually not a Stamford native. I moved here about 7 years ago when my job moved. I'm actually an IT person at heart. My whole degree and career was in IT, but I was one of those folks that was a jack of all trade, master of none. I can do project management. I was a business manager. At one point, I advanced to the associate COO seat. But unfortunately, as with big companies, when downsizing happens, I was laid off. And then what? Recruiters didn't know what to do with me. I had all of these skills, but no 10 years in any one particular skill, which is what a lot of jobs after almost 15 years in corporate are looking for. And so I started my own company. It kind of landed in my lap. I had a lot of people encouraging me. And so at one point I was like, I'm going to try to find another job and I'm going to start my business. And in the end, I decided to give up the job hunt. The business started flourishing. And here we are 3 years later.
Wow. So it was really like a fire kind of start to just kind of stop looking for a job and say, I'm going to go full in with the business.
Well, kind of. What ended up happening was, so when I lost my job, about mid-year. And so, you start to figure out what is your next move. How does that go? Come up with your plan, what jobs you're looking for. And I was really full steam into that. And I was filing for unemployment. And although I live in Connecticut, I worked in New York. New York State unemployment actually sent me a letter that said, we think based on your credentials in the job market that you're going to run out of unemployment benefits before you actually find a job. And we think you should join our self-employment assistance program. You'll still collect unemployment, but we're encouraging you to start a business. So I kind of felt like everything lined up. Not only do I have my supporting circle saying start a business, but unemployment is telling me start a business. So I was like, all right, I'm going to try this. So 6 months go by. Month 7, kind of had one foot in the door, one foot out. I was still looking for jobs because you need a backup plan. And I was starting the business. And I really said to myself, at this point, my 6 months, my savings is starting to run out. What am I really going to do? I need to make a decision here. And at that moment, I said, I'm going full steam into the business. The next month, I got 7 clients into contract. It was just because I put my commitment in one place, and it just has been, it's all the work that I had done in the previous 7 months, but it just kind of came to a head at that moment.
Oh, that's we love entrepreneur stories here. Sucker for some entrepreneur stories. So tell us about how you got into the marketing and social media space, yet you still do web design and you like IT, but how does the social media come into play?
It's a very interesting story. So it's really still because in my mind, because I'm a techie, I see everything as code, algorithms, and I'm always curious about how do things work. And ironically, at the time that I was starting my business, I was just getting into Instagram. Instagram had been around for a while, but I'm one of those I'm an 80s baby. So I was still on Facebook and I was still adopting it. And then I was volunteering with a couple of small businesses here while I was still working for corporate that they were like, what's a hashtag? How does Instagram work? And just from that perspective, researching it and explaining just from being helpful and friendly. And I was just doing it to volunteer and just kind of figuring it out for them and learning it for myself. But what it really boiled down to is that while I'm a techie, I'm also an artist. I paint in my free time and I'm a dancer as well. So it's really taking all of that creative and making it meet technology. So if you take creative and technology, you get a digital marketer, because even web design, it's still creative on top of technology.
Wow, that's a real loop right there. So dancing and being creative, I guess, is what you do in your free time. What kind of dance? How do you dance? You know, what is this kind of outside work that you do? Because we all spend most of our time at work, but what's this outside work?
Well, it's actually really funny. Even it's like if you even go back further, like you go back to my college days, my degree, my master's, or excuse me, my bachelor's, my major was in computer information systems, but my minor was in dance because I always just want to be a dancer. My whole life I've done ballet, I've done classical Indian dance, I'm a trained dancer, and I just I love dancing. I love all aspects of it. I was a Zumba aficionado, fanatic. I was thinking about being an instructor, but I teach my own dance classes, or at least I did pre-COVID. I was starting to teach soca dance classes. So soca is a genre of music out of the Caribbean, and I am from the Caribbean, so it's kind of like a toot to my roots kind of thing. Share my culture. I mix it with the Indian side of me as well, so like we bring everything together. And but yeah, like, and then I paint. The stuff that I paint is all Asian and African inspired. So because due to the roots of the Caribbean, it's just a mix of African and Asian cultures. So it's really a lot of fun.
That it sounds fun. So would you say that your creativeness in these African and Indian roots inspires how you do your marketing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I love most about my business is I get to know people. I don't just say, hey, you need a website and then do just like wireframes. It's one of the things that I don't do as part of my business. People will come and this like, can you wireframe this for me? And a wireframe, for those who don't know, is where someone will sketch out, this is exactly how your website's going to look. But being a creative, I kind of look at what you give me. I look at who you are, what you're about, what your business is. I try to hear what your voice is. Then I take your message and I lay it on a design based on colors, and it's kind of an inspiration in the moment. It's very artistic, the whole process. There are some people that are very methodical and they will wireframe it and they'll say, I'll give you 3 square boxes on top, 2 on the bottom. But sometimes if I tell you that and then you give me things that has 5 points, then maybe I want 5 boxes on the top and 2 on the bottom. It really depends on the messaging and as it evolves and all of that. So I really do get to know you and take some of that cultural influence, the colors, the fonts even. Some people are like, this is I worked with a client that was a manufacturing firm. She's like, we have to be very cut and narrow. We can't be too creative. We have to be very corporate. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, but you can be corporate and interesting. And it was something like playing with fonts. I got her to move away from Times New Roman and Arial and use a couple other fonts that were still professional, but gave it just a little more flair.
If you don't mind me asking, what were those fonts? Because I've been looking for something where it represents us in a professional manner, because I don't feel like we have the flexibility as other certain companies do that don't, represent or look like us.
Yeah.
But I still want to, have some swag lean with it.
Yeah. Well, I don't actually remember those off the top of my head, but I can definitely get you that later. But a couple that come to mind is like pairing Domine. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's like domino, but an E on the end. And then Rubik, Rubik as the sub font. So headings should have one kind of font, and then it should be paired with another font for the body to give some distinction. And honestly, I just Google font pairings, honestly. And Google, like, there's graphic designers that have done the legwork to say these fonts look good together. And then I kind of go down and look at the fonts with the clients and say, what do you think about this? And then we try them. Because sometimes the font may look good in the sample, but based on the letter combinations we're using for our words, it doesn't look so good. Or maybe we're using an all caps version of it, which some fonts look really great without all caps. And other times they look crazy because they all have the I think it's called serif, the things that are on the sides of them.
Right.
So they look kind of curly Q, and you're like, that's not the look I'm going for. So, it's balancing that. It's a trial and error sometimes to just get the right fit.
Wow, you're really knowledgeable in this, especially in this tech space. How did that come about, even coming in the tech industry? There's not a lot of women in the tech industry, that often even use the term tech bros. So what drifted you into this direction of being a tech woman?
So that actually goes all the way back to high school. So I went to inner city high school in Buffalo, and there might be some people in the audience chuckling right now because everyone goes, isn't Buffalo farm country? Because I do get that often. And when we emigrated here from Guyana, we landed in Buffalo, and Buffalo is actually a thriving city, much like Stanford. Or honestly, in the Connecticut area, Hartford looks a lot like Buffalo. The building structure, the neighborhoods, the way it's laid out. When I have a cousin that lives in Hartford, and when I visit, it takes me right back to Buffalo. Like it just the way the city is laid out. So going to school in inner city Buffalo, it's what you think about with inner city is there's not a lot of opportunity. While I was in an advanced academic program for science and math, I was still trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life. My parents are both teachers. And as far as they were concerned, I had two options. I was going to be a teacher or I was going to be a doctor. Now, I didn't want to be a doctor because I'm squeamish. So blood and just having somebody's
Same.
life in my hands is just, yeah.
Yeah, it's too much.
Yeah. Also, at 15, 16, I knew that I did not want to spend another 30 years in school. At least everything you know about being a doctor is you've got at least 10 years of university residency and all of that. And I knew I didn't have it in me. And aside from being squeamish, which was lots of arguments from my parents because that was not acceptable. And then the high school that I was at just so happened to be sponsored by a local bank, and they were starting to bring in STEM programs, specifically IT. Some people, again, young people on this listening to this podcast will laugh. We actually had classes called keyboarding. They taught us how to type because computers, we didn't grow up with computers. They weren't even existing. They were just coming in, and like we're talking about the late 90s, early 2000s, right? So
a typing
yeah, they
class?
put computers in the school. And what was really cool was because they were trying to really implement STEM programs, particularly in the IT field in Buffalo in high schools, to give us a chance, right? Because they knew that if we weren't exposed to it, we were not going to get the exposure. And the programs that I were in included Cisco Networking Academy. For those who are familiar with that, at the age of 16, I was ready to take my CCNA exam. I was also 16 and I chickened out. So I didn't do
What's
it.
a CCNA?
CCNA is the Cisco certification, the certified Cisco networking administrator, meaning I could code servers and stuff that people go to like years of college to know how to do.
16?
Yeah, but because we were running all the cables through the schools, we were programming the servers. We actually outfitted as students with the guidance of teachers. We outfitted the high school. Now, I was great at it and I loved it, but I was 16. My parents didn't even understand it. So it's not like they would have pushed me, and I kind of let the opportunity go. I didn't take the exam. I was so scared. I was like, I can't take this exam. I don't know what this means. And so I could have had a different life had I taken the exam, but I have no regrets. But it really, really made me realize how much I love computers and the way they work and just wanting to know more about the way they worked. And so the school that I went to, which was, fortunately, I had strict parents. So going away to school was not going to be an option. So I went to Buffalo State College, which was right near home. It was a SUNY University program, and I did computer information system. And what's different about CIS than computer science or computer engineering is you kind of learn all aspects. Computer science focuses a lot on theory. Computer engineering kind of focuses a lot on how things are built, how the computer itself works, machine learning, all of that. And CIS is somewhere in the middle where you're learning all of the programming languages. I was a master programmer by the time I got out of college and I used to tutor programming. People would come in with programs that didn't work, and I'd look at them and say, okay, let's work on it. Let's fix your program. And that's what I used to do. So when I didn't become a programmer, lots of people were confused. Like, how come you didn't go into programming?
Right.
I really love databases. I had this love for SQL, which is SQL, the database query language, and just the idea of how data is laid out. Again, algorithms, right? How you lay out the data, then how you query it. So I eventually, when I left college, my first job was a database administrator. So I went right into the database world that I wanted. And then just kind of, because I worked for one bank for like 12 years, but I did a lot of stuff for that one bank.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did it last so long? Do you see, like, you've been in this so long, do you see yourself changing and doing something different?
I've thought about that, but I realized that I genuinely just, computers are constantly changing, right? The technology is constantly changing. By the time you're well-versed and read up on something, a whole new way of doing things has come out. So for example, while I was a database administrator, one of the things we were taught from my database folks on listening is relational database, meaning the data is laid out in tables and they're organized and they connect to each other and you query that way. By the 10 years into my career, by the time I left the database world, we're start talking about non-relational databases, Hadoop, NoSQL, like they're basically using machine learning to query data. I can't even wrap my mind around that. Like, I don't understand. It's not relational. Like, so that's something I'm still trying to learn. And by the time I figure that out, it's probably going to change again, right? Because AI and all the things that are constantly evolving, it's always something new to learn, which is what I love about it. It's like, even with the websites that I build, I'm gotten proficient in one thing, but there's always another way to do it. So I'm constantly learning a new way. And especially when clients come and they have new needs and new requirements, I go research and I learn how to do it. And now I have a new tool to add to my toolkit.
I love that part, because I feel that in the virtual assisting world, one of the biggest things that we have to do is be adaptable, because we operate on our client software. Speaking of software, do you see yourself, maybe after Edge Space, building something
Yes.
like a SaaS product or anything like that?
Yes, I actually have. I have a couple of things in the works. Even while I'm running Edge Space full time, I've got a couple of things that in my, and I'm doing air quotes for those who can't see me, free time. I don't know when that is, but I do actually have a couple of things in the works. I never did see myself as entrepreneurial or coming up with ideas. I'm always like, that's for smart people. And I've always had people say, but you're smart. I'm like, no, that's for smarter people, right? I'm a machine.
You're pretty smarter,
Yeah, well, I never really thought of myself that way. I always thought of myself as a cog in the machine. Give me a bunch of instructions and I'll just go do it. And I was happy doing that. And then I think, like you said, trial by fire, this whole entrepreneurial think outside the box. And especially in the world that I'm in, I see where the gaps are. I see where, I wish this did this. And instead of going, I wish did this, and somebody else would invent it, I've now gone down the path of, I'm going to innovate a solution and talk to the right people. Or it might not be my solution to innovate, but I'll tell somebody who I think can innovate it because it's more of their world. I'm like, go do something with this because we need this.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy how 3 years I'm always thinking outside of the box. Like someone's going this and this. I'm like, we should start a business. We can do X and you can do Y and we can put it together.
So we've gone through a good chunk of this year. What do you have planned for the rest of the year?
Finish strong. I don't believe in luck when it comes to business, because I think what you put in is what you get. However, given COVID, I am going to say that I have felt very lucky and blessed that my business thrived through COVID. And a lot of it is a testament to the work that I've done in the previous year with the networking and just all the, they say the pokers in the fire are coming through. However, COVID is catching up to a lot of my clients now. Those who did have a good year, things are starting, projects are starting to get canceled because the budget, didn't work out the way it was supposed to because of COVID and stuff like that. So my plan for the year is to finish as strong as I can, because the reality is I do work with small businesses and nonprofits, and everybody's going through a trying time, some more than others. And, wherever I can fill in gaps, I can. And then other times we just kind of pivot. I'm teaching more classes, which is great because I love teaching. And so as I have more free time because projects are completed or slowed down, I've shifted to teaching more and thinking outside of the box, even in my own business. I just redesigned my website, and now I'm starting to think of tools that I can give people. Like, I don't believe in ClickFunnels because I think sometimes it can be a little scammy. But what I want to do is be able to give you a tool to use. Like you and I had talked the other day about, if I were to come up with an SEO checklist, would that be useful? And you were all about it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Like I just put out a web cost calculator. What that means is I get a lot of questions around, how much am I supposed to budget to build a website? They said, well, outside of my costs, right? Your web developer costs, you need costs for your hosting and domain, and just kind of giving people a line of sight to, how do I know if I want to go with Wix or HostGator or WordPress in general and all of that. So the calculator was designed to help people kind of make it easy. Play with your options before you actually go play with your money, kind of thing. I'm still working on that because unfortunately as a techie, it's a little technical. So I need to break it down a little further. So that's kind of what I'm working on for this year, tools for people to use and grow their business.
That's dope. Question in that, actually. So a lot of us non-coders and everything, obviously, use places like Wix, WordSpace, Shopify primarily even now. But when I was growing up, when we thought of websites, we thought of like zeros and ones and like actual code. What is the difference between maybe some of these coding like websites versus a Wix or a Shopify?
So what you find with Wix, Shopify, Squarespace, those are your kind of what I would call standard that everyone uses for what's called a drag and drop interface. You can't have an ugly website. because it allows you to see what you're doing, right? The hardest thing about code, particularly web code, you can't see it. You have to like know what you want it to do and then put all the tags in. And I particularly hate coding in HTML. I'm an object-oriented programmer for my programmers on the line. And HTML is not that. And just so I actually have a website that I put in what I want and it spits out the HTML. I understand what it's doing, but I don't actually have to write the code or something else if I need to write code. But so the thing with those websites, it makes barriers to entry really low, right? It makes it much easier for anybody to build a website to support their business. When I first started my business 3 years ago, as we mentioned, trial by fire, the irony in that was I was still not quite committed to the business. I knew I was going to do it. I had researched the name, but I hadn't really committed. And I was on a flight somewhere. And the guy sitting next to me on the plane just was making conversation because we were delayed. And he goes, "So what do you do?" And I would normally say I'm a project manager or a business manager. So I was trying it out. And I said, "Oh, I run a digital marketing company." He goes, "Really? We have a startup." It was actually a startup that makes feminine products that are non-toxic. And it was really interesting. I was like, "Do you have a website? Do you have a business card?" Now I had none of these things. I had no business card. I had no website. I had no digital footprint. And I was like, so now here is a potential big client because it's a startup that actually has some momentum. And I have no actual, nothing, no collateral. I have nothing to give him. So when I got to my destination, I was like, I need a website. And I was like, I went to Wix and I built my website within an hour using their artificial design interface. It gave me pictures, words, layout, everything. Like I actually had to think very little about it because Wix has, with their artificial design interface, their ADI gives you a pre-built template and the language, like it actually writes the copy for you. You just have to wordsmith it. And then of course, Wix has its own library of photos. So for me, I had a whole full functioning website in an hour that I kept for 3 years. Now, if you want to go to WordPress where you have to, I wouldn't say code, but you definitely have to think a little bit more. There are plugins like Elementor or Site Origin. Some people use Beaver Builder that turns WordPress into a drag and drop interface. But what I find is that when you're going to the websites that have a WordPress capability, you have more opportunities for your SEO to just refine it and just design interface. You just have many more design elements to play with that you're a little bit more restricted with the drag and drop interfaces like Shopify, Squarespace, and Wix. Now, Shopify is unique. Shopify is unique in the sense of if you're doing e-commerce and you have a major marketplace and stuff, if you can afford the Shopify like annual fee, like to run a Shopify website, you should go Shopify because it's built for e-commerce and it can't break. If that makes sense. When you're trying to do WordPress and Wix for e-commerce, you sometimes run into issues where things break. Wix a lot less. WordPress is very known to break on the e-commerce side. And so if you can afford your fees for Shopify, you want to go Shopify all the way because it's built and designed just for e-commerce.
So what's your favorite?
WordPress, ironically. A lot of people ask me why. And it's because I'm a designer and a coder, not because WordPress lets me code. WordPress just lets me do more, especially with Elementor. It's such a powerful tool. 90% of the websites that I deliver on WordPress are done in Elementor. There are a couple that are not in Elementor, and those were some very specific reasons, like it was a design that we were just updating using what was in place. But Elementor just allows me to scale faster. Because like, for example, if I build out the homepage and I have, this gray background with a blue box and these specific fonts in it laid out in a certain way, if I right click and copy and then I go to the About Us page, I can paste the style just like you can with fonts and Word. And now all I have to do is change my copy. In Wix, Squarespace, and Shopify, I had to manually go redesign that whole page to match the homepage, where all I did in this case was a right click, copy, paste kind of deal.
Okay, right. Wow. Okay, so I guess that wins. I'm a Wix user, so I like how it's going.
Yeah.
So what is next? So you have edge space marketing. You said you're working on some things. Now, without giving too much away, what are you working on?
I'm working on I'll be honest. One of them is a stock website to showcase minority photographers and just photos with minority people. One of the biggest challenges that I have with websites is finding stock photos that are good, number one. And number two, they have not just Black people, but brown people, Asian people, different ages, different professions, different things that don't look kitschy. Like it's really hard. We spend hours upon hours looking at photos to try to find the right one. And what's going to make ours different is that we are working, there's some technical side of it that's going to make it better, right? Like in terms of just for the user side of it, how do you find photos? How do you get showcased? But so that's kind of one of the things that came out of the pandemic, that like, this is what we need. And then especially, you know, with the current environment and climate that we're in with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's now important more than ever, right, for people to have opportunity and access. And then the other side of it, it has, just to say at the highest level, it has something to do with SEO, but making it accessible and affordable for small businesses. Like, how do you understand and use SEO for your business and your website?
Do you know something crazy?
What's that?
2 days ago, today's Thursday. So Tuesday, I spent over like 3 hours on my website looking for photos of Black people
Mm-hmm.
professionally,
Yep.
not as like a construction worker, not as like an athlete, just in a regular, doesn't even have to be a shirt and tie, just a nice like button up shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
No,
hard.
it is, and there's so many nuances to photos for websites, right? Because the photos are what convey emotion. It's where people make that emotional connection with your business. And I worked with a client, and we were building a website that has a base in Africa. And imagine you spent hours, we spent days trying to find a subset of photos that showed just Black people in a professional manner that was not stereotype. There were so many people in kente clothing, or they looked too young. If we looked up Black professional or a young Black man in like IT, it was somebody that looked like a chinos, right? He's in khakis and like a
Mhm.
you know, and a polo. And it's like, there's different elements to it. If you're trying to find somebody in a suit, then it's like it's too over the top or too underwhelming, right? And then we found one that was a little diverse, but in every photo that had this, it was like a construction site, and they were the foremans, but you had the Black man was always standing behind the white person. And just kind of the mental image of that was just kind of like, well, we don't like that. Why can't they
Right.
stand side by side or reverse? And we couldn't, days. And we still don't love the photos on the website, but we've made them work. And so it's just become very apparent that this is so needed. But the reality is, a lot of these stock websites are, they're sourced by the photographers, right? Photographers have to submit their photos. And so what we want to do is two things. One, create exposure for models, create exposure for photographers, and then also get those photos used so they can get some royalties out of it. And so that's where there's several elements to this that I think will be beneficial to the community at home.
That's a pretty good idea. And let me know if that actually goes off and everything, because I would love to, update my stock photos with, people that are Black.
Yeah,
Because
so we will definitely be, that's coming soon. The reality is that, again, trying to start that off the side of my desk, and the person that I'm starting with, he's also starting several businesses too. So we're kind of trying to every Friday meet and work on that business, which that Friday meeting keeps getting postponed right now.
understandable. So before we close things off and everything, we're gonna ask you, what do you want to shout out right now? What do you want to shamelessly promote? What do you want to? Do you have anything coming up?
Yeah, shamelessly promote my classes. So I am teaching for free. So I teach through the local libraries, and they're open to the public. I just finished teaching the SEO class, so sorry for those who missed it, but it will be on YouTube soon. So visit my website. All of the things that are on YouTube will be embedded on the website in the coming weeks, so that you can watch them or have access to them. But also, if you're interested in just, there are many people who don't yet know how to use Instagram. So I'm teaching Instagram for novices, where we're going to go from, how to post, use your Insta story and create posts, like posts, use all of the features of it. And then we're also going to do Instagram for business, which is, now that you know how to use Instagram, technically, let's talk strategically, because that's the biggest thing for businesses, is knowing how to use the platform in the right way to get the biggest following, because small businesses have a very low chance of going viral. That's the reality of it. But what you need to do is hit your hyper local market hard, figure out who your local influencers are, but post things that will resonate with your audience. And that's the catch. And so that's what I'll be teaching in the coming weeks. And then next week, I'm actually teaching how to use Google Forms to boost your business efficiency. So that one's going to be fun. That's through Fairfield County SCORE.
We love it. We love it. What's your follows? Where can we follow you at?
You can follow me at EdgeSpace MKTG. And unfortunately, this is a lesson. If you actually wanted to get your domain name, don't look it up like I did and then think about it for 2 weeks. Look it up when you're ready to buy it, because somebody bought it and then tried to sell it back to me for $1,000. And so I lost marketing for 3 years. I got it this year, 3 years later. But that is why I'm not edgespacemarketing.com initially. Now that works. But before it's edgespace MKTG.
Got it. We love it. Thank you for coming. And we actually hope to have you again later as these other projects start to come and build out.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Before you go, Ramblers, if you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and make sure you're following me across all platforms at Assistance HQ. Catch up on exclusive content and keep track of everything going on at OffSource. See you in October.